Good afternoon. My name is Eric Barron, and again, welcome to the 2023 National Book Festival. This author presentation, Backroads and Buried Bodies, Southern Noir with S.A. Cosby. Wow. Yes. So we're here specifically to talk about his book, All the Sinners Bleed. This book...
Y'all can clap.
Yes, you can clap. Go ahead. This book is an absolute thriller. The book follows a character, Titus Crown, who is the first black elected sheriff in the history of a southern town in, Charron County, Virginia. A deceptively quiet town with a lot of dark secrets. After years of working as an FBI agent, Titus decided to come home to Charron County and to campaign to become the county's first elected black sheriff. The setting is a place where there's not a lot of cops and robbers action like Titus's last job as an FBI agent, but after a year after his election, a revered teacher is killed by a former student, and the student is fatally shot by Titus's deputy sheriffs. As Titus investigates the shootings, he unearths horrific crimes and an elusive serial killer with apparent connections to a local church. Now, the book is really a collision of racism, race relations, religion, criminal justice, and so much more. It was really a pleasure to read. Thank you for writing it.
Oh, thank you for
and something that it just really resonated with me in particular. A little bit about me, just briefly. I currently serve as the United States Attorney for the District of Maryland. I happen to be the first black United States Attorney. Thank you. Thank you. For the District of Maryland.
All that stuff about moonshining is fake, just so.
Okay. Because I was thinking of putting some people on it. Okay. That means I'm the chief federal law enforcement officer in the state of Maryland. We investigate and prosecute a wide variety of crimes, some of the likes of which you wrote about in this book. Let's get to Mr. S.A. Cosby. I could call you Sean, right?
My mama named me Sean. So
All right. Sean is an award-winning writer from southeastern Virginia. He's the author of the New York Times bestseller, Razorblade Tears, and yeah, they've heard of it, and Blacktop Wasteland, which won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize and was a New York Times notable book, and was named a Best Book of the Year by NPR, The Guardian, and the Library Journal, among others. When he's not writing, he is an avid hiker and chess player. Mr. Cosby.
Thank you for that. I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that two of my books were also on former President Obama's summer reading list.
I know that's right.
I'm gonna say that the rest of my life. I'm gonna get pulled over for speeding and like, sir, do you know how fast you're going? No, but I was on Obama's summer reading list. But no, thank you for that. Thank y'all for having me here. Thank y'all for being here. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a dream come true. Being a part of this, being here in representation of the Library of Congress is incredible. Also, I got to meet Jessamine Ward a few minutes ago, which anybody who knows me, I'm not usually tongue-tied, couldn't talk, couldn't say nothing. So it's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be here with you, Eric, and it's a pleasure to talk with you.
Well, likewise, it's a dream come true for me too. Post-pandemic at the National Book Festival, this is awesome. Glad to be back. I understand you might be willing to read a few,
Yeah, I'll read the prologue, a little bit from the prologue, which is funny because when I sent this to my editor, she was like, well, people don't really like prologues anymore. And I was like, well, Dennis Lehane did it in All Darkness Take My Hand, so it should be okay. I'll read a little bit of it. Cherokee County was founded in bloodshed and darkness, literally and figuratively. Even the name is enveloped in shadows and morbidity. Legend has it the name of the county was supposed to be Charlotte or Charles, but the town elders waited too late, and those names were already taken by the time they decided to incorporate their fledgling encampment. As the story goes, they just moved their finger down the list of names until they settled on Sharon. Those men, weathered as wet leather with hands like splitting mauls, bestowed the name on their new town with no regard to its macabre nature. Perhaps they just liked the name because a river flowed through the county and emptied into the Chesapeake like the river Styx. Who knows? Who could know the thoughts of those long dead men? What is known is that in 1805, in the dead of night, a group of white landowners, chafing at the limits of their own manifest destiny, set fire to the last remaining indigenous village on that teardrop-shaped peninsula that would become Cherokee County. Those who escaped the flames were brought down by muskets with no regard to age, gender, or infirmity. And that was the first of many tragedies in the history of Cherokee. The cannibalism of the winter of 1853, the malaria outbreak of 1901, the United Daughters of the Confederacy picnic poisoning of 1935, the Danforth family murder-suicide of 1957, the tent revival baptismal drownings of 1968, and on and on and on. The soil of Cherokee, like most towns and counties in the South, was sown with a generation of tears. They were places where violence and mayhem were celebrated as the pillars of a pioneering spirit every Founders Day in the county square. Blood and tears, violence and mayhem, love and hate. These were the rocks upon which the South was built. They were the foundations upon which Cherokee County stood. If you had occasion to ask some of the citizens of Cherokee, most of them would tell you those things were in the past, that they had been washed away by the river of time that flows ever forward. And I might even say those things should be forgotten and left to the ages. But if you ask Sheriff Titus Crown, he would have said that anyone who believed that was a fool or a liar or both. And if you had an occasion to speak with him after that long October, he would have told you that maybe the foundation of Cherokee was rotten and fetid and full of corruption, not only corruption of the flesh, but of the soul. That maybe, just maybe, the rocks the South was built upon were shifting and splitting like the stone Moses struck with his staff. But instead of water, only blood and ichor would come pouring forth. He might touch the scars on his face or on his chest and lock eyes with you and say in that harsh whisper that was now his speaking voice, "The South doesn't change. You can try to hide the past, but it comes back in ways worse than it was before, terrible ways." He might sigh and look away and say to you, "Nah, the South don't change. And just the names and the dates and the faces. And sometimes they don't even change. Not really. Sometimes it's the same day and the same faces waiting for you when you close your eyes, waiting for you in the dark."
Wow. It's nothing like hearing from the author, right? Directly from the author. So here's a layup. What inspired you to write this book?
So when I was a little kid, I'm dating myself now. I just turned 50. So when I was a little kid, the Atlanta child murders were huge. It was nationwide news. And I remember just being terrified of that as a kid. And I was a kid who loved horror novels. I loved reading scary novels, but there was something so viscerally terrifying about a real case where, to our knowledge, children were being killed just because they were young black children. And, obviously, like a lot of folks, we talked about it as kids. There were rumors that sprung up from when we were kids, myths that came around that. So that was part of it. I think the other part of it was I started out writing a book. It was going to be a book about police brutality in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And I realized pretty early on, I was just too emotionally close to that subject. A book is not a 300-page sermon. And the book that I was writing at the time was quickly becoming a screed. It was a polemic, and I didn't want to do that. And so I come from a small town called Matthews, Virginia. It's 8,000 people in that county, and I know all of them. I'm related to everybody. It's like it made dating hard. It's like so. It's like I met this girl with pretty eyes. She's your cousin. Oh, never mind. Really? All right. But anyway, in my town, because I've counted them, there are 23 different churches. And I started thinking about this quote by Flannery O'Connor that someone asked her, is the South Christ-centered? And she's like, I don't know if it's Christ-centered, but it's definitely Christ-haunted. And I think it's haunted by hypocrisy. You know, it's 2023, and there are still churches in my hometown that I'm not gonna say somebody would stop me from going in, but I know I wouldn't be welcome to stay behind for the repast. And so all of that sort of swirled together. I wanted to write a book about religion. I wanted to write a book about small town life and politics. I wanted to write a book about evil, but real evil. And you know, evil is not this, it's not Dracula in a cloak. It's not the werewolf waiting for you outside, you know, under the moonlight. Evil is just the absence of empathy. It's the absence of caring. And a lot of times, I grew up in a very religious church. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, but that means our choir had a bass guitar. And so, I grew up in this idea of, you know, an over-exuberant expression of religion and over-exuberant expression of God's love. And so, in modern times, you see so many churches that don't exemplify that. You know, there's a church in Houston, I'm not gonna say who it is, Joe Osteen, that wouldn't, that wouldn't let people come in during a hurricane. And so all of those things sort of boiled up in my mind, and I wanted to talk about that. And I realized I couldn't do that from the perspective of my usual characters, which are usually outlaws and people on the other side of the law. I needed to have someone who was in some form of authority, a police officer or something like that, and show sort of this weight that they carry, especially a black police officer, especially a black police officer in a southern town. And so, you know, I'm fascinated. There's a TV show called True Detective, and season 1, I was fascinated, I was obsessed with that story. And there's a line that Matthew McConaughey says, that we're the bad men that keep other bad men from the door. And I'm fascinated by people who, like, willingly decide to stand in the gap between the darkness and the people that they care about. And so all of those things sort of boil together into this book, which was really difficult to write.
Well, I like how within the book, and you do explore how, where does that lack of empathy come from? And I think that's real. There are a few phrases that come up when you, if you Google your book, Southern noir, Southern fiction, Southern Gothic. What do these phrases mean to you, and how does this particular book fit into that genre?
I definitely think I was aiming for a Southern Gothic tone. And I think what Southern Gothic is, if you want my definition, Southern Gothic are stories told in the South that are dependent on people's connection to the South. They're dependent on people's connection to the land, to the religion, to the interconnectivity that exists in small town, that sort of tapestry that ties everybody together. And the horror that comes from that. You know, there's a beauty in knowing in a small town that everybody knows you. There's a horror in that because everybody knows you. And so, and when you talk about Southern noir, I think it's just this idea of crime fiction that takes place in a place where you can't get away from the people that you've hurt. You know, if you commit a crime in New York City, for instance, if you're in Brooklyn and you go, you know, through the tunnel to Manhattan, you may never see the person that you've hurt ever again. But you're in a small town, 8,000 people, and I know this because I used to be a bouncer. You get fighting on Friday night, you're gonna see somebody Sunday at the Walmart, you know. Just you gotta know how you're gonna deal with that. And how do you deal with that on an existential level? And so that's what Southern noir is. I mean, labels are labels. I mean, I'm proud to be a crime writer. I think crime fiction is the gospel of dispossessed. You know, like you can read a book by Philip Roth, like American Stain. You can read something like The Collected Works of Raymond Carver, which I love Raymond Carver. And there are things in there that I may not relate with. Like I'm never gonna be a professor at a Upper West Side college, you know, but I understand desperation. I understand loss. I understand anger. And I think crime fiction is able to really take all of those things and disseminate them, you know. I think all great books to me, all great novels are crime novels. You know, whether you read Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, or you read something like McTeague by Frank Norris, an early 20th century writer that I like. You read something like A Thousand Acres by James Smiley. You know, that's a book where there's a lemon cake poisoning, there's beatings, there's theft, there's all that. So I think crime is the great unifier in letters and fiction to me. You know, but I don't put those labels on it. I let other people do that.
Yeah.
I just try to write the best book I can.
So talk to me about the process of writing and delving into these heavy issues, you know, race, religion. There's like a Charlottesville, Virginia type scene in the book.
Yeah.
You know, how did you deal with that, and how did you come up with these?
You know,
scenes?
a lot of times, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, I have a writer friend or writer who's not a friend, just somebody I know. And a lot of times it's a white man, and they'll ask me, like, I don't know how I can write about stuff anymore. You know, I feel like I can't write about this or that anymore. As a writer, I think the thing is, you can write about anything you want, but you have to be willing to take the hit. You have to be willing to take the consequences. If you write from a place of honesty and truth and empathy and love and respect, yeah, not everybody's gonna like it, but if you can, at the end of the day, look in the mirror and say, I did the best I could, you can write about anything. When people ask that question, what they really want is permission to write about what they wanna write about without consequences. They wanna write about what they want about free of responsibility, and you can't. You just, you know, you have to be willing to take the hit. And so for me, when I wanted to talk about, yeah, that scene was definitely inspired by Charlottesville. A lot of the stuff in the book, I talk about race a lot, I talk about religion, I talk about being a black police officer.
Right.
You know, I talk about what it feels like to be, you know, on one side, a black man, on the other side, you're blue. And what does it feel like to hold that badge? And all those things are things that are controversial. But I'm not afraid to talk about them because I know my intent. I know what I'm trying to say. It's nothing gratuitous. I don't write those things just to sell books. I write those things because they mean something to me. So if you come up to me and it's like, oh, I didn't really like that book. I think you're celebrating police officers. That's fine. I'm not, but that's your opinion.
Right.
But I don't worry about it because I know what my intent was. And so for me, a big part of this book was talking to former police officers. There's a couple gentlemen, they don't want to be named, that I was very lucky to have time to talk with and have lunch with over the course of about 3 or 4 months. And really, a lot of the things that Titus says came from those conversations. There's a scene in there where Titus talks about he has, make sure his clothes are creased really nice. And he's got extra pair of pants at his office because a black sheriff can't be seen with a wrinkled uniform. That's a direct quote from a guy that I interviewed who was a black sheriff, the very first black sheriff in Virginia. And so a lot of that process is me confronting things that are important to me, things that I feel need to be discussed. However, to quote Papa Stephen King, doesn't matter what you write about, doesn't matter what you're trying to say if the story is not interesting. Story is paramount. Story is king. Once you got a good story, then you can talk about it's the the serial murders are the honey, but the racial and socioeconomic discussion is the medicine. So.
Well, that's exactly right. So Titus, you talked a little bit about his character development. I was wondering, is he based on anyone specific or any of the other characters in the book?
Titus's brother is based on my brother. So that's why the book is dedicated to my brother.
Okay.
And Titus is not me. I think people think that. He's way smarter than I am. So it's like, I'm the laziest writer in the world. Titus is very smart. He's organized. If you ask my partner, she'll tell you I am not. I get yelled at for not putting the top on the peanut butter a lot. I might make another sandwich. There's no rush. But I think Titus is, you know what's funny about Titus? That's interesting you said that because for a long time, I didn't have a handle on Titus. I knew what I wanted the book to be about. I knew the story I wanted to tell. I just couldn't get a grip on him. For a long time in the manuscript, he was just black sheriff. It's like black sheriff goes to work, black sheriffs go home. And I just couldn't get a grip on him. And I talked to a friend of mine who's a former minister. He had been a minister for a long time. He had left the faith. He's a non-denominational minister now. And we had lunch, and he said, the thing that really drove me from the modern church, and when I say church, I don't mean religion. I mean church as an institution, not religion. Church, little c, not, as Steve always say, not church, capital C.
Right.
But he said, I felt like we weren't helping the least of us. And that was something that stuck with me. And that gave me the doorway to sort of get into Titus's head. Because beyond his faults, because Titus is the A-type personality. He's a control freak. He's not a great boyfriend. He's trying, but he's just not really good at it. But beyond those faults, he cares about the least of us. He really does. And he's willing to put his life on the line for everyone, not just the Scott Cunninghams who run the county, but everybody, his daddy, his brother, the kids in the school, his best friends, even the people that don't like him. He's literally willing to die for them. And that was when I got a grip on who he was and what he's about. I think, he has been called a great hero. I think he's a great hero because he fought a great evil. Your heroes are only as good as the evil they overcome. Walter Mosley said this to me once. Yes, I'm name dropping. I met Walter Mosley. But he said, everybody has morals until they're tested. And that's what I wanted to do with Titus. I wanted to test him, and he's got somebody else once said to me, writing is putting your character in a tree and throwing rocks at him. And I think I threw bricks at Titus. But he's the guy that can take it. He's the man with the broad shoulders. There's a running joke in the book that he never gets to sleep, So, but I fell in love with him as a character. People ask me sometimes, who's your favorite character? I think Bug will always be my favorite character from Blacktop Wasteland, just because, Blacktop Wasteland came at a time where I'd been dropped by an agent. I didn't ever think I was going to get published, and I wrote it in sort of this fever dream. I had seen an interview with Bruce Springsteen on American Masters, and he was talking about when he wrote Born to Run. He's like, I wrote it because I had nothing to lose, And so Bug will always have a special place in my heart, but I think I would hang out with Titus. I don't know if I can hang out with Bug. Bug kills a lot of people. Don't be around a truck door with Bug if you've read the book. So
I know a lot of sheriffs, and they're good people, but they're not cool. Titus is cool. Yeah, So yeah, I kind of fell in love with him too. I could hang out with him too. I'm wondering, is there anything that didn't make it in the book?
So I'm so glad my mom's gone on to heaven since she's not here, because there was a very, how can I say this? There was a very detailed, intimate scene in the book. And I felt really proud of myself. You're like, oh, I've never written a really intimate scene before. This is hot. I like this. This is cool. And my editor was like, I don't really think we need it. I was like, but I worked so hard on it. I read romance novels, and like, I really did my research here. And she said, I don't think we need it. I'm like, all right, I guess. I mean, can I keep a little bit of it? So there's a little bit of it in there when Titus walks in the sheriff's office and he sees his ex-girlfriend. So there's a little bit of the scene there, but it was way more than that. It was real Red Shoe Diaries going on, if you remember that. So that didn't make it in. There was a scene also, a flashback with Titus and Marquis, who's his brother, who's sort of near the well, not really in trouble, but kind of on the outskirts of trouble. And there was a scene of them swimming in a creek. Which is based on something me and my brother happened. My brother and I were swimming, and I started to drown, and my brother saved me, and like literally saved me from drowning. And then an hour later, like punched me in the arm because we were playing a game riding home from the beach. And so I love that sort of dichotomy between brothers that Marquise and Titus love each other, but they can also give each other a hard time, but they would do anything for each other. Somebody who read the book, the first draft, pointed this out to me, that the only time Titus genuinely laughs is when he's with his brother or he's with his dad. He doesn't laugh any other time in the book. And I didn't do that on purpose, but that's sort of where that subconscious relationship sort of seeped into the book.
Well, tell me, what do you hope that readers take away from the book?
I hope that people realize, like I said, the murder, the mystery, all that is the honey. But really the story is a personal journey of Titus. I think, my mother used to say, if you want to make God laugh, make a plan. And I think Titus is that type of person. He had to learn that. He has an event in his childhood that happens that makes him feel like he has to be responsible for everything. And you don't. And I used to feel that way. And you will literally grind yourself to powder trying to do that. And by the end of the book, not only does Titus hopefully overcome the evil in his town, but he's changed. He's a different person. He's able to let that go, let that weight go, and just live. And I think that's the thing I hope people take from it. I think people read the book and think I hate religion, and I don't. But I don't think you need to be in a physical church to be religious. Spirituality is everywhere. It's all around us. I think we are too concerned. There are people who run churches today that if an actual angel descended from heaven, 4 faces, wings of fire, they would lose their mind, their brains would leak out of their ears. But if you say you believe, then you believe in everything in the Bible. The Bible is not just pastor's anniversary and new robes and Lincolns and Cadillacs. It's the existential existence of good. And I think that's something I hope people take from the book too. Titus is a force for good. It's not supernatural, but he gets a little help, I think, toward the end of the book. And I think that's something, it's a magical world, really, I think.
So Titus, he kind of rides off into the sunset after a scene that all of us might, see ourselves doing in a dream or something. But is he going to come back? What's next?
I get asked that a lot, and I really didn't intend for him to ever come back. I like to write standalones. All my books are closed loops, But I was talking to my agent recently, and he's like, "Yeah, the book's doing really well." I was like, "Oh, good," And I got to keep my cat and the fine treats he's become accustomed to. And he said, "Do you think you might have another Titus book in you?" And I was thinking about it. I said, "Let me think about it for a while." So I thought about it for a week, and I realized, I don't think he'll become a series, but I think Titus will come back. I think he's got a couple more things to say. Plus, I like it. Plus, he's smart. Yeah. I like the idea of him solving another mystery, putting it together. We'll see.
Okay. Well, who are you reading?
Oh, gosh. I'll give you my top 3 I'm reading right now. I just finished Ozark Dogs by Eli Craner, which is a Southern noir novel, really good. I'm actually, don't tell nobody, but I got an advanced copy of Jesmyn Ward's new book. Yes. It is it's the type of book, as a writer, it makes you want to throw your laptop out the window. Because it's like, I'm never going to do anything as good as this, so I might as well just, start collecting stamps or something. And I just finished an early draft of a book called Missing White Woman by my friend Kelly Garrett. So yes, give up for Kelly, she's great. I just finished that, marvelous book. Kelly's one of our great crime writers. And I'm looking forward to a book that's coming out very soon. A friend of mine named Eric Philip Clark has a book called All the Smoke. He describes it as the talented Mr. Ripley in a hip hop setting, and that comes out. Yeah, it is great. So I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent. So with 15 minutes left, tell us about your writing journey. How did you start as a writer?
So my very first story. So here's the thing. My mom used to tell this story, and I think it's a legend. I don't think it really happened, but as we say that my way, if it's not true, it should be. She would read bedtime stories to me, Red Riding Hood, all that kind of stuff, and like the Three Little Pigs. And she told people that I would complain about the plot holes in the Three Little Pigs. It's like, why didn't they build all their houses out of bricks? They had bricks this whole time. And so eventually she got tired of reading me stories, and she was like, you know what, write your own stories. Then you got to worry about this. So I wrote this story about these spacefaring gnomes that landed in the magnolia tree in our backyard. And I was about 9 years old, and I gave it to her. And I remember her reading, it's a terrible story, by the way, it's awful. But I remember her reading it, and she kept looking at me, and she was like, you did this all by yourself? I'm like, yeah. She said, you came up with all this by yourself? And I said, yeah. And the look on her face is the high I've been chasing the rest of my life. Because it's just that sort of feeling that you write something that somebody connects with. So my writing process is very intuitive. I sort of had a circuitous route being a writer. Went to college for a couple years. I had to drop out. My mom was ill, and she got more ill. I didn't end up going back. I did this whole, again, I'm dating myself. I did this whole Jack Kerouac thing for a while, where I hitchhiked across country. But in all of that, I was still writing. And so what happened was I had been writing for a while, got published short stories and stuff, and I had an agent, and I thought, oh, well, this is it, let's pop some champagne bottles. We got an agent, book didn't sell. got rejected 63 times. And he sent me all the emails. Like, why would you do that? I get it, we're not selling it. And and so he ended up, I won't say he dropped me, but we parted ways. And then I wrote Blacktop Wasteland, because I figured I don't have an agent, I'm not writing to an algorithm, I got nothing to lose, I'm just gonna write what I want. And then my partner was like, oh, there's this big crime fiction festival called BoucherCon, and it's happening in St. Petersburg, Florida, you should go to it. And I was like, we don't have the money for it. At that time, I was writing full time, she was supporting both of us. And she's like, you should go. And so a week later, she come in the door, and she threw this envelope at me. I was like, what's this? She's like, open it. So I opened it up, and she had printed up airplane tickets and hotel accommodations for me. And she's like, you're gonna go to this event, because you're always gonna regret it if you don't. So I go to the event, and I'm on this panel at the event. I got put on a panel, it's all luck. I got put on this panel, Southern Crime Fiction. And it was me, Ace Atkins, Stephanie Post, Alice Segura, and Eric Pruitt. And after the event, after the panel, a lady got up and she says, well, I don't have a question, I have more of a comment. And Ace Atkins, who's this big dude, he's bigger than me, he nudges me like, here we go, it's gonna be good. So this lady was really upset because she felt like we had been denigrating the South. And she said, you know, I for one, love the antebellum period. Yeah, and so the moderator was my friend Eric, who's a perennial poo-poo stirrer. He loves stirring up stuff. And he was like, Sean, would you like to answer that? I was like, I'd love to answer it. And I said, you know, I love a bustle skirt as much as the next person, but antebellum period wasn't great for everybody. So she got mad and left. After the panel, I walked down the hallway, and this guy starts coming toward me. And he's like, hey, I want to talk to you. I thought it was her husband. So I dropped my bags, because, you know, these are rated E for everybody. And but he was an agent. He said, my name is Josh Gessler. I'm a literary agent. I really like what you were talking about in there. Are you represented? Do you have anything that you're working on? And I had Blacktop Wasteland. So I got home. I wasn't going to send it to him. My partner was like, send the man the book. No harm. I sent it to him in November of 2018. He signed me as a client in December of 2018. We sold it to Flatiron in February of 2019.
Wow.
So, 25-year overnight success.
So there's the writing, the process of writing, but you gotta, to some extent, you gotta know what you're writing about. And it's impressive to me as a federal prosecutor that you really are able to, you capture a lot of the nuances of law enforcement, investigating, and for example, this dynamic between like the local law enforcement folks, the state, the feds, and the interrelationship and between the two or three, and you know, sometimes the local authorities, you know, no, this is ours. We don't want the state authorities or the feds coming in and taking over. This is our responsibility. And so I'm wondering, tell me about the research.
Oh
research
gosh,
process.
it was terrible. Oh God, I hate research. I'm the laziest writer in the world. I make up towns because I don't like doing geography. So it's like, I just make stuff up. But I wanted to get it right, and so from talking to those former police officers and sheriff deputies, I realized that some sheriffs see their county as a fiefdom, and some sheriffs see their county as a place to be protected. And sort of, you've got to balance that. Like you said, some sheriffs have a crime, they are loath to bring in the state police or the federal police. Some sheriffs like, hey, come on, take this over, I can't handle it. And so I wanted Titus to sort of be in the middle, because Titus is a very confident character, but he's the type of character, he wants to do what's best for the county. You know, he wants to do what's best for the people. And he's the type of character who'd be willing to give up the investigation if he thought that was what was best for the people. He has a certain amount of humility, you know, and there's a line in the book that comes from C.S. Lewis that true leadership is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And I wanted him to be like that. But yeah, the research, the FBI stuff, I got lucky. I have a friend, I probably shouldn't say who it is, but I have a friend who's a reporter who got me an interview with an FBI agent. So I got a little bit of that stuff. Like I said, I talked to former sheriff deputies. I have a friend who is a state police officer in Virginia. So I talked to him, but it was awful. God, it was so much research, so much reading, and it was like, oh, can I get to the good part already? Jiminy Christmas. But it was fun too. I think it lent an air of realism to the book. I hope. I think it also made you care about Titus because, again, he's balancing all these things. He's got all these plates spinning, you know, and so it makes you want him to succeed. It makes you want him to survive. And so, yeah, I hate doing research. I hate it. It's awful. There are writers that love it. I got a friend, like I mentioned Kelly earlier. Kelly Garrett loves research. You know, she got a 6-foot-long whiteboard and she writes all these notes and stuff, and I don't do that at all.
So tell me, you know, for the writers out here, the aspiring writers, any advice?
There's 3 pieces of advice that somebody gave me that I'll share. One is you gotta read and you gotta write. And what I mean is, if you want to be an aspiring writer, read as much as you can, because reading other writers will show you what you can do or what you might be good at. Also shows you what you're not good at. Everybody's not good at everything. Like, I think I'm pretty good at dialogue. I'm terrible at spatial relations. So like, if you built a house based on the way I describe it in my first book, it'd be 63 feet long and 8 feet wide. And there's so many walls in there. Like, why are there so many walls in this house? But read a lot because you learn what you excel at and what you can, you know, we all start out in imitating the great writers. From that imitation comes originality. So read a lot and also write a lot. I know a lot of people who want to be writers who are like, well, I'm not ready yet. I haven't got inspired yet. Inspiration is a myth. You're either gonna write or you're not. You know, and you know, there are certain things I do now that are traditions. Like, I love listening to music when I write. I like listening, I sit in my easy chair that I write, but the inspiration is I wanna write. I want to tell stories. You know, I can't wait for a muse to reach down from Olympia and touch me. The other thing is, you got to get a thick skin. You have to. To be a writer, I think you have to have a little bit of egotism, because there's going to be so many people that you send your stuff out to that are going to tell you either in a kind way, this doesn't work for me, or, and I've gotten this, oh, this is terrible. This is awful. And you've got to have a little bit of egotism, like, all right, well, that's fine. I think I'm great, so I'm going to keep writing. You know, a little bit of spite helps too. A little teeny bit. There are a lot of people that rejected me that love my books now. Like, oh, we love this book. S.A. Cosby's an amazing writer. Am I though? Because 5 years ago, you wouldn't spit on me if I was on fire. So, and I think lastly, if you think writing is what you're supposed to do, don't let anybody change your mind. Don't let anybody change your mind. You know, you can go to school and get an MFA, you can get a bachelor's, you can be taught verb-subject agreement, you can be taught active voice versus passive voice, you know, you can be taught 3-act structure. Nobody can teach you how to be a writer. Nobody can teach you how to be a storyteller. You're either born with it or you aren't, and if you think you're born with it, don't let anybody change your mind. Don't let anybody dissuade. I had family members that told me to give up writing. I had a family member every Thanksgiving, well, how's your little writing thing going? I ain't seen your book yet. So when I got my first royalty, not my advance, because my advance was small. When I got my first royalty check, I went and I got this bank statement and I printed it up and I went to Kinko's and I made it like the size of almost like a poster board. And I took it to Thanksgiving dinner and I just sat it on the table. I didn't say anything. Don't do that, that's petty. I shouldn't have done it. It made the rest of dinner very awkward. But if you really believe you're supposed to be a writer, don't anybody change your mind. Because at the end of the day, you know, we all have a finite amount of time on this planet. You won't regret the things you did. You'll regret the things you didn't do, you know? And you know, I've been very blessed the last couple of years to have a lot of success. But even before the success, I knew I was a writer. My mother used to say, birds gotta sing, bees gotta sting, you gotta write. That was her thing.
I know that's right.
You know, and so that's what you gotta do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, amen to that. That's all the questions I have. I just want to thank you. Yeah. This has been a real treat for me Like I said, the book resonates so deeply with me, and from now on, I'm going to tell people, if you want to understand my world, you got to read this book,
Oh
All the
man,
Sceners.
thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so very much. Thank you
All
guys
right,
so much.
thank you.